Before NCML, I used to head an organization called Cargill, which is a global leader in food and agriculture. And for a very long time, I was associated with Cargill. Prior to Cargill, I was with ITC, and prior to that, with the State Trading Corporation. So my career actually, not that I'm an agriculture graduate or have an agriculture background, but I was actually a foreign trade and international business master's. I got into the agri space and as part of my sort of posting in my first job, and stayed there for the next 33 years, if I may say so. And what kept me going was the opportunity, just the impact one's work has on the population, on the size of the impact. And gradually, as one got deeper into the subject, one's exposures increased, got to know more about the various crops, and being in a global organization like Cargill, it gave one the exposure to the global agriculture and food scenario, and obviously helped one acquire a lot of experience and knowledge of the subject, and then apply that knowledge and experience to the agriculture situation in India. And my particular focus in my years in Cargill was in addressing the problem of nutrition. Cargill was one of the leading sellers of marketers of edible oils in India, with our brands Nature Fresh, Gemini, Swikar as the leading brands, the consumer brands. And Cargill in 2008 undertook the initiative to fortify its edible oils, which was a first for the industry. And edible oil fortification is now pretty much a given in the consumer oil segment, and Cargill can take pride in being a leader or the pioneer in fortification of edible oils for consumers. Edible oils in India had been fortified for the Vanaspati sector, which was a government norm. But as I said, that what I had seen about agriculture and food around the world helped me look at that situation in India and try and create solutions that would address some of the challenges that India faced. And similarly, a lot of learning comes from interacting with people in the space. They're very well-meaning and knowledgeable people in the sector. And by being part of this sector and being employed and running companies in this sector, one did not just have the opportunity to think and create ideas on what needed to be done, but one also had the opportunity to implement those ideas. So and again there I followed the same principle, that there were so many things that we could do, but there were many more things that we could enable. And I think that's what kept me going. So India, I would say, has done quite well over the last decade or so in terms of addressing its food needs. We are largely a food surplus country. We are engaged. Our production of food grains is significantly higher than our needs. The government in the last 1.5 years, I would say through the COVID period, has done a lot of work in terms of distributing this food grain to the needy through as part of the National Food Security Act, but also in terms of going beyond that and giving extra grain to people. So I think India has been able to address its food security needs. There's a law to that effect. It's an entitlement for a large percentage of the population to have access to food. Now, there can be questions on how well it is distributed. Is it reaching all the people to the last person who needs it? Yes, there are questions. And I think for a country as wide and as large as India, as dispersed as India, where not every individual is probably counted, there could be challenges. But I would say by and large, India has made giant strides in terms of addressing its food security and making sure that its largest part of its population has access to, I would say, affordable food grains or cereals. Now, where there is an opportunity for improvement is that while we may have addressed to a large extent our hunger needs, there is a large gap in the nutrition needs. Because remember, India is coming from a place where we were actually short of food maybe 5 decades ago, 6 decades ago. And we've moved that sort of needle to a point where we have addressed what I call the calorie needs. We need to still address the nutrition needs. And I think if there is a gap today, it is really in addressing the nutrition needs of the country, not as much as the hunger need. So one is, of course, as I said earlier, that our ability to reach the last person is still not fully there because, and that effort is being made. I mean, the whole effort to connect everyone digitally, and we will require technology to do that. Physically, I don't think it is possible. On the nutrition side, as I said, the focus of the government was to address hunger, and therefore a lot of effort has been made in providing calories to the population. What has not been addressed is that there is a need for nutrition, and this is particularly true for young women and children. I mean, that is where India has the largest impact of stunting and wasting amongst the children, and that needs to be addressed. That is being addressed in patches, in pockets. There are initiatives like focused nutrition delivery to certain portions of the population. There has been in the last few years, I would say last decade, a more concerted effort toward fortification of food for particularly the needy. Staples are being now considered for getting fortified. There are government programs around that. There are private sector initiatives around that. So I think it's a journey which we have first addressed hunger to a large extent, and now there is increasing awareness about addressing micronutrient deficiency and therefore addressing malnutrition. But yes, being a large country, having difficulty in accessing everyone in the country is taking its time, and these efforts will have to be intensified and continued for quite some time, because for nutrition in particular, the outcomes are discovered much later, because unlike hunger, where you feed a meal to someone and you know that he's or she's satiated, micronutrient deficiencies, when covered, make themselves visible much later. So I think we are moving in the right direction, but a lot needs to be done. And I personally feel that there is need to be greater measurement of how we are doing it, and deployment of technology to ensure that all those who need food and those who need nutrition are all mapped and covered and addressed. And I think that would be the process improvement required. The intent is certainly there. The acknowledgement that we have a problem is certainly there, and steps are being taken. They can certainly be speeded up. I'm glad you asked that question, Surabhi, because that is a very serious concern. Global warming and every rise in temperature is, for India, agriculture is critical because our vast population depends on it. And also with such a large population, we need sufficient supplies of food. What global warming and the sort of rise in temperatures are affecting us at two levels. And one is, of course, that we are having, the other element is that India's agriculture is significantly, relative to a lot of other countries, dependent on what I would call the weather, which is the natural rains. India's irrigation or irrigated agriculture is significantly lower than, or as a relatively smaller part of its total irrigation or water needs for its agriculture. And India needs a lot of water. And not only needing water, but when you're dependent on nature for water, or we're dependent on weather for water, the timeliness of those that water availability or the rains is also critical for the growth of crops. What we are witnessing and if you've noticed in the last 3 or 4 years, we've had scenarios where we've had good rains at the time of sowing, but they disappear when they're needed in terms of the crop growth, or they come again when they are not needed in terms of the harvest period. So these are all impacts of the climate change that is affecting how the rainfalls are progressing. What it has the potential to do, and very well acknowledged potential to do, is to harm the output that Indian agriculture is aspiring or needing to get, which could potentially result in lower yields from the crops that India predominantly grows, which is paddy, wheat, maize, and pulses, and that would be disastrous for the population, simply because it would affect the farm incomes, because the farmers, obviously, Indian farmer is poor and is heavily dependent on his crop coming good and getting the right price for it for the rural economy. But more importantly, for creating sufficient food stock for India's food needs. So that is so the whole element on climate change and the impact of it on agriculture is very critical to India's food security and its population's economic security in future. That is one element. The second is that with higher CO2 sort of in the environment, we are also witnessing a drop in the nutrition content of these crops, which essentially means that if we have historically believed that wheat has so much nutrition, paddy has so much nutrition, or some other crops have X, Y nutrition, but if the crops are growing in an environment which is not conducive, there is there is scientific evidence to suggest that the nutrition in these crops is also dropping. And that is a double whammy, I would say. So for India, climate change and managing its implications is going to be critical as we go forward. So there are numerous countries which have in the recent times, and when I say recent, I mean I would say countries in Northern Hemisphere like US, Canada, Australia in the Southern Hemisphere have done well, and they've had access to agriculture technology. I mean, they've introduced a lot of technology. India's obviously not been on that technology path as much as those countries. But if I look at countries which are similar or were similar to India at a certain point of time, I would say look at China, where they've done a great job in terms of managing their small farmer holding and converting that into, producing the right food. Countries in Latin America, Brazil, Argentina have had significant growth in their agriculture production. Countries in Eastern Europe, Ukraine being an example, have leveraged their access to land and whatever technologies to grow their agriculture production. So those are some of the countries I would say which have actually brought up their agriculture production. They have affected their environment. I mean, we've had the whole issue with Brazil in the Amazon forest, but they much earlier, I would say about 15-20 years earlier, they've started addressing that problem. So countries, the whole concept of climate change and the global warming and its impact on agriculture has gathered momentum over, I would say, over the last decade, and every country is waking up to it. The consumers are waking up to it, and therefore, I mean, you have a situation where largest production edible oil consumed in the world is palm oil, and not just for edible purposes, but also for pharmaceutical, chemical, and even biofuels. Palm is considered, and there has been over the years a huge hue and cry around the whole palm plantation issue, and consumers have woken up to it. The governments have woken up to it, and I think there is awareness which is being created, and it is important that, and this is not something that one country can change for itself. I mean, it can do, India, for example, can do much better in how water is being used for the crops that we are producing, and how we're making choices on producing crops. So those are some of the decisions at the tactical levels in terms of saying that, okay, this crop is not needed, or it consumes disproportionate amount of water, or soil erosion, and therefore we need to switch to another crop. Encourage the farmers, have policies that encourage the farmers to switch to crops which are more, I would say, environmentally conducive and supportive. But that's at a tactical level. At a strategic level, I think the world will have to come together to solve this problem, because it is not just about one country or two countries, but everyone acting on it together. Particularly for India, I think it's very important because a large population depends on agriculture, and there are uncertainties around agriculture. So what is important for India is to bring a certain amount of predictability and link employment to agriculture. And agriculture obviously is the biggest employer in India, but the challenge is that it also hides a lot of what I would call underemployment or disguised unemployment, because large number of people are engaged in producing little from a small piece of land. So there the need is to change the mindset from just agriculture to a rural economy. And agriculture is much more than just sowing and growing and harvesting and selling crops. It is about animal husbandry, it's about dairy, it is about training people at the rural level in terms of warehousing, crop protection, about testing, assaying, so essentially building skills in the rural area to take care of the agricultural needs. I mean, the more examples like, maintaining of agricultural equipment, technology training to follow the markets, training in, commodity price understanding, accessing the markets through screens rather than, open outcries. So those are all areas where I think there is still a lot to be done, and parts, a little bit of it is being done. NCML as an organization has tied up with Agriculture Skill Council and is engaged in training people in the rural areas in warehouse management. Because one of the challenges that we face is not just about producing food, but also how much food is wasted in India. Agriculture produces wasted in India, and being able to take care of that goes a long way, or should go a long way, in addressing the food security needs and bringing the cost of feeding down, because what is wasted is essentially added to the cost of production. So there is significant opportunity in India to address that space. Agriculture provides that platform, but it is not just about agriculture, but it's about a lot of activities which surround agriculture. The good news is that there are a lot of companies today. The private sector is much more involved with agriculture and the rural economy than it was a long time ago, where it was largely, as I've often said before, that Indian agriculture historically was a tripartite arrangement between God, government, and the farmer, where everything depended on nature. Government did all the, interventions, whether it's through price or fertilizers or water or electricity, and bought the crop from the farmer, and farmer was the man doing the job on the ground. But that has changed with a lot more industry intervention, and the various companies, whether they are agri input companies, whether they are seed companies, whether they are crop nutrition companies, harvesting equipment companies, and of course the companies that buy from the farmers, are trying to connect directly with the farmers. And there are different organizations which have strength and reach in different parts of the country. So I wouldn't say that one company can or should attempt to cover everything across the country, but good examples of work being done in one region can be translated or shared with other participants in the marketplace in other parts of the country, and that's how good practices that are generated or created or experimented in one part of the country can be spread around. The intent of the private sector is certainly strong now. It is being backed by a lot of capital, a lot of investment capital that is coming into it, and that is certainly good news for this sector. How we use it to benefit the farmer, to encourage and enable the farmer to grow more, to I would say to preserve better, and to get a higher price for what they're bringing to the market. And I think this is happening, but obviously it's just the beginning. So I would categorize our role actually in two sort of areas. One is what we are as doers and what we are as enablers. So what we do is really about saying that, okay, how do we run our warehouses? I mean, we are converting to solar energy for a lot of our warehouses. I mean, we have the space, and therefore there is an opportunity to convert, and some of those experiments are at work. Particularly recently, we've launched a silo, which is storage of grains in bulk silos, which are essentially being, on a test basis powered by solar energy. Similarly, all our warehouses have the rainwater harvesting capability. We have a testing business where we are obviously, removing the use of paper in generating reports and everything. Similarly, we have what we call the agri consulting and agri, automatic weather station business, which is really about being able to predict the weather, being able to advise the farmers in terms of when to use what agri inputs to address pesticides, to have an understanding of the size of their crops, letting the market know about giving accurate predictions about what the crop is going to be, how it has to be stored, where it has to be sold. So those are all the areas what I call as what we do. What we are enabling is that through our activities of creating storage, I mean, we today manage about 2 million tons of grain storage. We are enabling preservation of crops, which means that we are enabling reduction in wastage. By our widespread network of crop testing and inspection, we are ensuring that what is being brought to the market is of good quality and free from any mixtures or crop deterioration, and so therefore somewhere addressing what I would call public health to that extent. What we are doing with our weather stations as well as our agri consulting is essentially enabling the market to know where the crops are, how they are growing, whether they are coming out in good conditions. So these are what I see our role as enablers of crop preservation, awareness about the quality of the crop, and also awareness about the size and the timings of the crop.